Hello. It's a pleasure to be here in Louisville. I'm here to talk about toilet paper. Actually, what I do is I make art about everyday things. And I try to make, we've all heard all of these things before about climate change and about the things we're doing wrong. And for me, of course, we get tired. We all get tired of hearing the same thing over and over. Oh, well, we shouldn't fly in a jet plane because of the climate change impact. I fly in a lot of jet planes. But it's those everyday things we do which are having a real impact. And I try to make art that makes us think differently. Of course, I think we learn better, we take in a message better if we're entertained than if we're told. So I make art which has a message, and that message is all about these everyday things we do which are causing damage. And the impact, the positive impact that we can all have by changing these things a little bit. This is the waste from the making of toilet paper. It's in Canada, in Thunder Bay, and this is deforestation for the making of toilet paper and the most popular facial tissues. I try not to use brand names because rather than vilify a particular company, I would rather us change our behavior and therefore change the market by buying differently. If we buy one brand of toilet paper that's made from recycled newspapers, then we're saving a forest. And as small a decision as that seems, the impact is major. And if the cost is slightly more, isn't that worth it if we save a forest? And of course, as an artist, it's hard to picture certain things. How do we make an image of climate change? But again, art, I feel, we're getting a little echo. Art, I feel, can tell us something where dialogue has failed, especially in our country where dialogue has become so vitriolic. We've polarized in this country, and I think we could all agree that if we could pull back from that polarization, we'd be a lot better off. Fascinating. They told me that one of the great focuses of this festival would be about food, which of course is one of my favorite topics, and after art. And this, of course, is the caves at Lascaux, our first knowledge of man-made art. And look what they're making art about: food. And of course, it's also activist art. They wanted a result from their art, right? They probably didn't say, God, send us some more bison, but essentially that's what they were saying, I think. As an artist, it's so hard. How do I make a picture of climate change? Sure, we can take a picture of power plants, coal-burning power plants, which we know are one of the largest single causes of climate change. This one, by the way, is just up the Ohio River from us. And this is the ash which they produce, which is just up the Ohio River and is leaching into the Ohio River and the groundwater in Shippingsport. But again, if I can make art which really gets the message out there. Let's face it, we've all read about climate change. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and my family doesn't really believe in climate change. So if I can make art, and there's probably a few people here in Louisville that don't believe, that, like my family, complain about, well, we've had 7 years of drought and now it won't stop raining. And because, of course, I don't say anything. I don't say, climate change. But if we just all turned off the lights, maybe we wouldn't need so much coal. You're in Kentucky, so hopefully you know something about mountaintop removal mining. I have not photographed it here in Kentucky, but I have photographed it in West Virginia. I kicked myself. I was talking downstairs with someone, and he asked about a certain picture, this one, and I kicked myself because the man who led me to this picture, who died last year, he was about this tall, a West Virginia man, tough as nails. His name was Larry Gibson, and he's a model to anybody involved in mountaintop removal mining issues. This shot, it's actually the same place. Those woods are where I was hiding to take this shot. And it's really the quintessential mountaintop removal shot. I'm very proud when one of my pictures becomes the defining picture of something, even if it's mountaintop removal mining. But how crazy is it to be cutting down a mountain to get a little bit of coal? And especially, again, back to food, which led me to water, which led me to include mountaintop removal mining, because, of course, the Cumberland Plateau is the source of water for so much of the southeast of the U.S. And Atlanta has been in drought for the last, 10 years? And I'm convinced that mountaintop removal mining, which is burying those streams, I try to draw those long connections, which are hidden in our world. Who would know that if you buy a certain roll of toilet paper, that the boreal forest is being cut down to get it to us? It's not, no one tells us that, and why would we know unless we're crazy enough to actually dig into the facts? But I think we need to be. That's really the message of what I do, is that we really must stop being consumers and be citizens. I think to be an adult means being responsible for the impact of everything we do. And this is an issue I'll come back to. It's interesting to me that in this country, whenever someone protests something on the basis of an environmental message, the immediate rejoinder is jobs. Oh, well, we have to do that because of jobs. But in actual fact, this is Whiting, no, this is Twilight, West Virginia, which is right next to Whiting. It's a town where the coal mining is gone, and this is the post office in Twilight. That town was not enriched by coal mining. Time to talk about bacon. This is one of my many favorite pictures, and I would ask for a show of hands for anybody who wanted to guess what it was, but I'll just tell you. It's a picture of a lake, a lagoon of hog waste. The largest single toxic spill into an inland waterway in the United States wasn't an oil spill, it was a lagoon of hog waste which spilled into the New River in North Carolina and killed everything in the river. Now, when we have that, and these are maps showing us where we're looking at this very wet area in North Carolina. The next picture is really bad. If you have a weak stomach, if you don't want to see something bad, I'm sorry. My personality is such that I must look at the bad. This is a picture that might make a vegetarian out of you. If you don't want to see it, I recommend you close your eyes. It's not bondage and S&M. But yes, it's a gross picture. So here it comes. These hogs, there are many reasons not to eat meat. There is the human health reason, there is the cruelty to animals reason, and there is the environmental impact reason. And there are probably others. These are the ones that occur to me immediately. I I ate a little bit of meat today. They told me it was locally grown and raised. We are humans. We evolved eating meat. I don't think we evolved eating meat at every meal, which is what so many of us do. The approach that I have, in taking these pictures, what's happened to me is that I've changed my behavior. As I've learned these things, because there's a lot of research behind each of these pictures, it's forced me to change my behavior. I don't take a paper facial tissue, I carry a handkerchief. I get a lot of criticism for looking like a bedraggled beatnik because I wear my clothes till the last thread. These hogs, forgive me, I never stay on a straight line, but these hogs are kept in pens, and you can see they stand on a graded floor. So everything, including that fetus that you saw, goes down through the floor and into these giant lagoons of hog waste. The lagoons are, if you're interested in this story, the best reporting is in Rolling Stone. And there's a quite funny bit where it talks about a hog worker who falls in, and his brother-in-law comes and tries to rescue him, and he falls in, and they all die, of course, which in itself is not funny, but the writing was so good. So these lagoons are then sprayed out over fields. So these giant lagoons of hog waste, and you saw the factoid earlier which says that hogs produce 3 times more waste than humans, are sprayed out onto these fields, and this is all in a very wet area near New Bern, North Carolina. You'll see a shot of a very sick wetland in a minute. Here we see a farm, or we see 3 hog farms around what was a small farm. That small farmer had to leave his home and farm because of, it was a friend of his, this is an activist who guided me around down there, because of these 3 farms spraying this hog fecal matter. Can you imagine these high pressure sprayers spraying this stuff all day? I stood next to it. It's bad, and it's not just stinky. I mean, there's ammonia, there's a lot of bad stuff. So you can see this is a very wet area, and they spray this. This shows you the hog sheds, the giant lagoon of waste, and a spray field, which is, of course, right next to this wetland. That is not a healthy looking wetland. One of my other guides on this project was a man named Don Webb, who I'm very fond of. And I said, Don, I really have to take your picture. And he gave me this goofy grin. And I said, no, Don, no. Come on, look mean. Anyway, and I love this portrait. Again, back to, food, follow me here. Food, water. One of my pet issues is hydrofracking. I think you're not doing it here in Kentucky because the strata doesn't permit it, but the impact is nationwide. The price of gas in the US is about 1/3 the price of gas in the rest of the world due to the glut on the market from hydrofracking. Now hydrofracking, as you saw on the map, what I'm looking at is mostly in Pennsylvania. It's rural Pennsylvania, which was an area, an agricultural area. Now it's an industrial area. And we're not in our country thinking about these long-term ramifications. Each hydrofracked well, it's a 2-stage process, by the way. First, the drill rig comes in and drills the well. This is waste from the drilling process. Now, layers of shale are radioactive. So this waste from drilling is radioactive waste. But of course, there is no provision for that. Pennsylvania is another state with very little environmental regulation. So that waste is being sent to normal sewage treatment plants where the radioactive aspect passes right through and goes into our rivers. You've probably heard of the volume of water that's used in hydrofracking. It's millions of gallons of water per frac per well, and they frack each well many times. This illustrates the fracking process. That illustrates how much water. Those tanker trucks are filling up that reservoir to frack that well after the drill team leaves and the fracking team comes. And you can see that farmhouse just above the well would fit inside that reservoir. That gives you some sense of how much water is used. And of course, again, food, water. Water's going to be a crisis. The Ogallala Aquifer is gone. You know, that's fossil water and it's essentially empty. And yet we're using water to get natural gas to keep the price of gas in the US lower than the rest of the world. It doesn't, to me, it's not a recipe for a secure future. I was talking to someone about Fritz Haber, who is one of the great geniuses of the century. He did one of the most important things in the 20th century. He figured out how to synthesize nitrogen from air using natural gas. We use about 3% of our natural gas to make fertilizer. Fertilizer comes in, there are three essential elements to fertilizer. There's the nitrogen. All plants need these three nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The nitrogen, as you know, we get from essentially burning air with natural gas. The potassium we dig up from potash mines. And so the limiting factor is the phosphate, the phosphorus. Most of what we get comes from Florida, from these phosphate mines. Now, the interesting thing is, at our current rate of consumption, we've only got 40 years of phosphate left. Think about that. We've only got 40 years of fertilizer left at our current rate of consumption, and our rate of consumption is increasing. That seems almost more serious than a gas crisis to me. These are pictures of the waste of the phosphate fertilizer mining process, which has a tremendous climate change impact too. Climate change is going to be that gorilla in the china shop which changes everything. And even though daily the reports come out which indicate that it is worse and happening faster than we imagined, 3 days ago, the man who will probably be the Republican presidential candidate said that Rubio, said that it doesn't exist. And this is, I'm always trying to get the pictures which illustrate the whole story. This is Lake Champlain after a rainstorm, and you can see all of that fertilizer and sediment which have run down into that lake, which is causing these giant dead areas. You may know, it's sort of slipped out of the news, but in the Gulf of Mexico is a dead area the size of, I forget which state, a giant dead, let's call it the state of Rhode Island, a dead area in the Gulf of Mexico. We've forgotten about it after the BP spill. 40 years of phosphate fertilizer, there will be one country left which still has phosphate fertilizer. I would recommend buying real estate in Morocco. It's cheap now, but it won't be. And it's so rare to actually get wildlife impacted by an environmental issue. And these are pink roseate spoonbills flying over a phosphate tailings lagoon. I was very happy to get it. And photography is such a wonderful thing. There's only one of this. I was in a plane, of course, and we circled around to get this, and I'm screaming at the pilot, "Circle, faster, faster." And I got 3 frames before they flew away off the edge of that background. And there's only that one which is sharp. And it's always that way. There's one perfect picture. This is a picture of the Gulf of Mexico, looking from the water up into Louisiana of the sediment coming down the Mississippi River. After World War II, of course, we had these industries, the bomb-making industry, and by the way, another string I didn't tie was that the nitrogen which we need, the synthesized nitrogen, which is what we use for fertilizer, is also what we use to make bombs. And after World War II, all of those munitions factories became fertilizer factories. And similarly, the chemical weapons factories became pesticide factories. We use a lot of pesticide in this country. I've gotten to the point where I will only eat organic because, again, what I've read. The other thing which scares me is genetically modified foods. And it's amazing the volume which has entered our food stream. It's being done by one company. This is where they make so if you don't know, they have modified the genes in a variety of crops, cotton, wheat, sugar beets. There are a couple of others, I won't bother to name them. They've modified these crops so that they tolerate the application of pesticides, of the most widely used pesticides. The chemical name is glyphosate. I won't use the brand name. If you're interested, I'm sure you'll find it. But this is where they make that most widely used pesticide in the country. And again, I'm always trying to make that piece of art which tells the story. And it's often hard at these industrial locations. How do you make a piece of art from this rather boring industrial location? So often I'm looking closely at something. I assume this is a waste pit. I don't know exactly what. I go to these places year in and year out, and this is the same mechanical device over 3 different years. I think this one is 2010, this one is 2011, and this one is 2012. I have no idea what it is, I apologize, but it's fascinating to me, the color change of this waste liquid. And that's just an agricultural field that I thought looked very desiccated, and I liked the pattern. Again, I'm trying to tell a story. I'm eternally grateful to the pilots that fly me, and I'm also very grateful to the environmental groups which support me and give me information about what the good subjects are. And the other thing I try to do is make pictures which they can use. I try to be thinking about what the legislative issues are, and I try to make pictures which can be used in those fights, in those debates between, and I think it's a false debate, by the way, that debate between jobs and environment. I think if we don't address both issues, we lose. And there's some stories that I haven't been able to tell completely. This is cotton. Cotton is first a very water-hungry crop, and the Aral Sea in Russia was drained dry to irrigate cotton crops, and it's also the crop on which the most pesticides are used. So not only do I not use a paper facial tissue, I also use my handkerchiefs until they have holes in them. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I would urge you all to think about really all those little things we do and what can we do better. And let's see if we can't bridge that vitriolic gap that we seem to have in this country, which has sort of stopped us from making progress. Thank you.